He had no name, no direction, only pain and a single memory that kept him moving when everything else told him to lie down and disappear. For 3 days he walked, more like hobbled, dragging a bloodied paw through snowdrifts deeper than his small body could handle. A young bobcat, barely 6 months old, limping alone across the white stillness of a Montana winter. The forest stood frozen, unmoving, but he couldn't stop. He hadn't eaten in over 2 days. His ribs pressed sharply beneath his spotted coat. The wind cut into him like blades, howling through the trees. Still, he moved, because somewhere beyond the ridgeline, beyond the broken tree line, there might be something warm, something safe, or maybe someone. On the 3rd night, the snow returned, light at first, then thick, blurring the world in white. His body swayed, his breath came in gasps, but in the distance, a yellow light flickered, faint, wavering. A porch lamp, a roof line, a shadow of a home. He collapsed just outside the fence, only feet from the wooden steps. His side heaved with the effort to lift his head. One paw stretched out, pressing into the snow. His ears twitched, but he didn't growl, didn't hiss. He just waited. Inside, the Hartman family was settling in for the night. The fire burned low, dishes cleared. The sudden storm had closed in fast, locking them into their ranch house earlier than expected. But they were used to quiet isolation. Until a sound broke. Through it, not barking, not a coyote's cry, but something softer, strained, almost human in its pain. Tom Hartman opened the front door, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the dark and caught a trembling shape curled near the porch. At first, he thought it was a dog. But the ears, the tail, the wild outline, it was no domestic animal. Still, it didn't flee, didn't bare its teeth, it just looked at him, right into him. You need to see this, he called to his wife. They stepped out together, coats pulled tight, snow crunching beneath their boots. The young bobcat didn't flinch. His breath made small clouds in the air. His eyes watched, wary but not resisting, even when Tom knelt beside him. He's just a baby, Em whispered. The decision didn't need to be said aloud. Tom wrapped the bobcat in a thick wool blanket and carried him to the barn, where an old heating lamp still hung. They cleared out a corner stall, laid down, clean hay, and gently set him there. He didn't fight, didn't try to hide. He curled into the warmth like it was something he'd known once, like he remembered what safety felt like. The family stayed for hours, watching him from a distance as he slipped into an uneasy sleep. Outside, snow covered his tracks, but inside him something began to stir, something deeper than instinct, a memory of scent, of touch, of fur not unlike his, only larger, softer, something worth walking toward. Morning brought calm. Frost clung to the windows, the air outside thick with silence. In the barn, the heating lamp glowed softly over the stall. Beneath it, the bobcat barely stirred. His eyes stayed shut when the door creaked, but his ears shifted at the sound of approaching steps. Em moved carefully, carrying a small bowl of warm chicken broth. Tom had spent half the night online, searching for any guidance on caring for an injured wildcat. There weren't many answers, only instinct and compassion. She set the bowl down just beyond the straw, not too close. His nose twitched. Slowly, he raised his head, blinking into the light. He stared at the bowl, then at her. Then, inch by inch, he pulled himself forward, starving but cautious. He didn't lunge at the food. He lowered his head as if seeking permission. When his tongue finally touched the broth, it was quiet, grateful. From the barn door, another figure appeared, Remy. Their old German shepherd stepped in silently, her thick fur dusted with gray, her gait slow and deliberate. She had lived through storms and loss. She had seen change, her eyes fixed on the small creature in the hay. The bobcat stopped lapping and met her gaze. He didn't hiss. She didn't bark. Her posture eased. A soft, low sound escaped her, somewhere between a chuff and a sigh, as she settled just outside the stall. For an hour they didn't move. The humans watched quietly, unsure, holding their breath. That night, as the cold deepened and snow fell harder, Tom brought in extra blankets. Remy was already there, lying near the stall, head resting between her paws. The bobcat sat upright, watching her. He didn't blink, and when Tom approached, something surprising happened. The bobcat rose, limped across the hay, and lay down beside her. Not touching, but close. Remy didn't react. She opened one eye, looked at him, then closed it again. In that moment, something ancient stirred. Not friendship, at least not yet, but recognition. She saw not a wild thing, but a lost one. And he and her saw not danger, but something steady, something solid. Outside, the snow erased his past. Inside, he began to lay down new steps. By the third day, the stall had transformed into a haven. The young bobcat no longer recoiled at footsteps. His wounds, though raw, had begun to heal. The swelling in his paw was easing. He moved cautiously, not from fear, but with a sense of understanding. This place wasn't a trap. It was safety, and always nearby. Remy. She didn't force closeness. She simply remained, still and steady like a lighthouse in fog. At first, he kept a gap between them, but that space lessened each night. By the week's end, there were brief moments when his side would rest lightly against hers. Neither pulled away. It wasn't just Remy who noticed. The Hartmans' 3 shepherd pups, barely 5 months old, had been kept out of the barn, but their curiosity grew stronger with each passing day. On the 6th morning, Em opened the barn door just enough to let them peek inside. They entered hesitantly, ears low, tails tucked. The bobcat immediately noticed them. His body tensed, pupils narrow. One pup, the smallest, took a step forward. A soft, almost inaudible sound came from Remy. Not a growl, but a signal. A warning. Not to the bobcat, but to the pups. The smallest froze. Then something remarkable happened. The bobcat lowered his head. Not in fear, not in dominance, but in invitation. His body relaxed. He blinked slowly. Once, then again. The smallest pup wagged his tail once, crept closer. The bobcat stayed still. The pup sniffed his side and lay down a few feet away. Minutes later, the others joined. By dusk, they were all nestled in the straw together. 4 dogs and a wildcat, breathing in one slow, steady rhythm. No one said a word. There was nothing to say. That night, under a sky full of stars and branches, heavy with snow, the barn was filled with a quiet that only true peace brings. Not tamed, not trained, chosen. And in that stillness, the bobcat, still nameless, began to dream again. Not of surviving, of staying. The days that followed were, not just for rest, they brought discovery. At first, he watched from the shadows, observing the pups. He watched how they played, how they tugged at ears and chased nothing through the barnyard, how they barked at the sky just to hear themselves. Slowly, something inside him began to shift. One morning, as the pups tumbled in the frost-covered grass, he stepped from the barn, deliberate, cautious, but not afraid. The pups froze. The smallest dropped into a playful crouch, tail high. The bobcat tilted his head. Then, unsure, awkward, he crouched too. Not perfect, not quite right, but close enough. The pup sprang forward, tapped him with a paw, and dashed. Off the bobcat, startled, then chased. It wasn't graceful. He rolled, leapt, stumbled, but he played, and the pups welcomed him. There were awkward moments. He tried to bark, but it came out a strange chirp. Tried to wag his tail, but it flicked awkwardly. Still, he ran beside them. Later that day, Tom stood on the porch, throwing a stick across. The pasture for the pups. One by one, they chased it. And now, so did he. Returning with sloppy, proud grins, the pups bounded back to the porch. Then, for the first time, the bobcat ran too. He didn't grab the stick, not at first. He watched them, studied their rhythm. On the 3rd throw, he darted forward, silent and focused. His paw struck the ground as the stick landed. He skidded to a stop, gently picked it up in his mouth, and trotted back. Not all the way, just to the edge of the porch. He dropped it, ears perked, eyes locked on Tom, and waited. Tom laughed softly. "Would you look at that?" he whispered. "He's trying." Inside the house, Em watched from the window. Remy, resting by the door, lifted her head and gave a single slow wag of her tail. The Bobcat didn't know how to be a dog, but he was learning. He was trying. It happened on the 7th morning. The sun had barely touched the frost when Em set out the metal bowls, lining them up like always. One for each pup, a little broth, soft meat, warm grains. The dogs circled, tails wagging, eyes bright. Jasper, yes, by then they had started calling him Jasper, stood nearby, alert, ears forward, eyes wide with hunger. He had become more confident, more present. He played. He followed commands he didn't understand, and sometimes he even waited his turn. But that morning something cracked. Before the bowls even touched the ground, Jasper lunged, not with malice, not with cruelty, but with a desperate, raw hunger buried beneath days of calm. He crashed forward, shoving the nearest pup out of the way. The little dog yelped, stumbling, into the hay. Em dropped the last bowl with a startled cry. The barn fell silent. Jasper froze, standing over the food, sides heaving, body trembling, not from rage, but from realization. He hadn't meant to hurt anyone, but instinct had spoken, louder than memory. Tom stepped into the stall from the yard, his voice low and shaken. "This isn't going to work," he said. "He's not one of them." Jasper didn't move. He stood in the middle of the stall, head low, ears pinned back. His tail flicked sharply. Then Remy moved. She rose from her corner, slow and deliberate. Her body passed between Jasper and the rest of the family like a curtain being drawn. She stopped right in front of him, so close their fur touched, and sat down. She didn't growl, she didn't bark. She simply turned to face the others. And then, without breaking eye contact, she lay down beside him. A line had been drawn, not of threat, but of loyalty. She wouldn't let them take him, not like this. Em knelt beside the whimpering pup, gently checking for injuries. There were none, just fear. The little one pressed its head into her hands, safe and unharmed. But the fear lingered. Tom stood in the doorway, silent. His hand gripped the post, his jaw clenched. Still, Remy didn't move. Jasper hadn't eaten. He didn't touch the food. He lay down slowly, head resting beside hers, eyes open, watching, waiting. Outside, the morning was bright and cloudless, but inside, something darker had moved through, a shadow that reminded them all. He was not a pet. He was not trained. He was something else. But Remy had made her choice. And for now, the family did not argue. That night, the barn was quiet. No playful growls, no paws skittering in the straw. The pups curled in a tight bundle near the far wall, casting anxious glances toward the stall. Em stayed with them for hours, her voice soft, her presence calming, but even she could feel the tension still thick in the air. Jasper hadn't moved. He stayed pressed against Remy's side, motionless but not asleep. His ears flicked occasionally, catching every creak of wood, every shift in the hay. Just past midnight, Tom came to the doorway, flashlight off, letting the moonlight guide him. He leaned against the frame and watched them, man, dog, and wild thing, and he waited. In the morning, something had changed. Jasper rose before the others. He moved slowly, cautiously, limping on his still tender paw. He sniffed the edge of the stall and stepped out, looking toward the bowls that Em had just begun to fill. He didn't rush. He sat and waited. The pups approached carefully, unsure. The memory of yesterday's scare still flickered in their minds. But when one of them reached the bowl first, Jasper stayed seated. His eyes followed, but his body held still. Not a sound escaped him. Em's breath caught. She placed the last bowl and stepped back, unsure if she could trust what she was seeing. Remy padded to Jasper's side. She didn't look at him. She simply stood there, shoulder to shoulder, like a sentry. After the pups had eaten, Jasper rose. He walked to the one remaining bowl, sat slightly apart, and ate slowly, deliberately, without urgency. When he finished, he stepped back and returned to the stall. He curled up alone this time, a few feet from the others, and waited. Later that day, Em found him sitting near the open barn doors, watching the pups wrestle in the dirt just beyond. He didn't move to join them. Not yet. But when one of them approached and sniffed at his side, Jasper didn't flinch. He nudged the pup gently back toward the others with his shoulder. He didn't pounce, he didn't dominate, he yielded. Remy stood beside Em, watching. Her tail swayed once, low, slow. "He's trying," Em whispered. Tom didn't answer, but that evening, for the first time since the incident, he left the barn door open, and Jasper didn't leave. The call came on the 9th day, a voice Em hadn't expected, stern, clipped, formal. The local wildlife rehabilitation officer, word, had gotten around. Maybe a neighbor had seen paw prints. Maybe someone whispered about a bobcat just beyond the fence. The message was clear. A wild animal, even one young and injured, couldn't stay in a domestic home. It was state law. Jasper had to be surrendered. Em hung up in silence. She didn't tell Tom right away. She walked to the barn instead, boots crunching over dry snow. Remy rose to meet her quietly. Jasper sat nearby, grooming his shoulder with slow, deliberate movements. He looked up as Em approached, eyes soft, aware. She knelt beside him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know how to explain to them who you are now." That evening, the family ate in silence. Remy didn't touch her food. Outside, in the fading dusk, Jasper stood alone at the edge of the pasture, staring into the trees. The forest that once raised him waited to reclaim him, but he didn't move. 2 days later, they came for him. A white truck, unmarked except for a small state seal on the door, pulled up the long gravel drive. There was a carrier in the back, gloves, a tranquilizer on standby. Jasper didn't run, he didn't hide. He stood beside Remy as the officers approached. His body was still, his tail low but steady. One man raised a hand, but paused when Remy stepped between them. "It's okay, girl," Tom said gently. "Let them." They opened the carrier and waited. Jasper turned to Remy. For a long moment he looked at her, ears forward, whiskers twitching, chest rising and falling like a slow drum. She didn't move, and then he stepped into the carrier on his own. The doors clicked shut. Remy followed. The truck as it backed away, her trot turning into a run. She barked once, sharp, high, broken in the middle like a sob. Em called after her, but she didn't stop until the truck turned down the tree-lined road. That night she lay outside the barn door and didn't go in. The pup circled her, confused, whimpering. She didn't move, she didn't sleep. And in the space Jasper once filled, the straw remained untouched. The world beyond the ranch was vast, cold, and unforgiving. The officers said the sanctuary was safe. Acres of protected forest, food stations, monitoring. A place for wild things to remember what they were. To forget what they had almost become. But Jasper didn't forget. 3 nights later, he slipped through the enclosure's boundary. No one saw how, no one knew when. All they found was a torn section of fencing, marked by paw prints in the mud, one still faintly stained with blood. He ran, not with fear, not with fury, but with purpose. Through thickets, over frozen creek beds, across snowy rock. His injured paw throbbed. Hunger clung to his ribs. Ice caked his whiskers. But he didn't stop. Somewhere in the dark beyond the tree line, something waited, someone? By the second day, his strength faltered. He moved slower, tongue dry, breath shallow. Storm clouds pressed low on the horizon. Snow threatened. Still, he limped through the plains, staggered down game trails, guided by memory and scent, and the ghost of warmth still buried beneath his fur. On the 3rd night, wind howled through the mountains. He didn't stop. His body collapsed just outside the Hartman fence line, barely 100 feet from where they'd first found him. This time he made no sound. No yowl, no rasping breath. Just the dull thump of a body folding into snow. His side rose and fell in uneven rhythm. His eyes blinked once, twice, then closed. A shadow in the snow, barely breathing. Inside the house, the pup stirred first, then Remy. She lifted her head, ears twitching, nose working. She stood, crossed to the door, and growled low. Tom opened the back door just as the wind changed, and he froze. Remy darted past him, paws barely brushing the frozen ground, charging into the dark with a purpose no one could name. But everyone felt. Her bark cracked the stillness, frantic and urgent. When she reached him, she didn't hesitate. No whining, no sniffing. She lay down beside him, curled her body tightly around his, pressed her warmth into his frozen bones, and waited. Em reached them moments later, flashlight in hand, breath catching when the beam found Jasper's still form. For a moment she feared he was already gone. Then, an ear twitched. They gathered him in silence. No crate, no gloves. Just arms, blankets, and the sound of Remy's low, steady whine. Back in the barn, they laid him on a bed of hay, wrapped in warmth and quiet hope. The pups gathered around, still and silent. Remy never left his side. She knew what the wild had taken from him, and now she would give it back. He slept for nearly 20 hours, no sound, no movement, just the slow rise and fall of his chest, the occasional twitch of a paw, like chasing something only he could see. Remy stayed beside him the entire time. She didn't eat, barely drank. When Em tried to coax her away, she only lifted her eyes, calm and unwavering, and rested her head again. On her paws, Tom brought blankets, Em brought broth. The pups watched with quiet patience far beyond their age. By the second morning, Jasper stirred. His eyes fluttered open, slow, uncertain. He blinked at the ceiling, then turned his head. Remy was there. Her nose gently touched his ear. His tail flicked once. He remembered. The pain was still there. His paw swollen, his body weak, but the fight was gone. What was left was surrender. Not to death, but to trust. Later that day, the vet came. Dr. Lawson had known the Hartmans for years, but even she paused when she saw the barn. A wild bobcat curled against an aging shepherd. Pups gathered nearby, a family standing watch. She examined him gently. Jasper didn't resist. He watched her with tired, golden eyes, calm, unafraid. "He's lucky," she said softly. "But he won't survive in the wild again, not with that leg." Em's voice trembled. "Then what happens?" Dr. Lawson hesitated. "He's imprinted, on her, on this place. His behavior isn't wild anymore, he's bonded." Tom looked down. "So that's it. We wait for the state to come again?" But this time things were different. There were records now, assessments, reports, documentation of behavior, proof of social bonding. Jasper wasn't just a rescue, he was a candidate for exemption. Dr. Lawson offered to advocate. And the Hartmans, quiet people who'd never pushed before, began making calls, filling forms, attending hearings, and somewhere, slowly, the rigid system began to move. Remy seemed to understand. Each evening, she lay with Jasper near the barn, doors watching the sun vanish behind the hills. They didn't need the details, they just needed time. Weeks passed, then a letter arrived, plain envelope, shaking hands. A simple answer, he was staying, officially, permanently. Spring came. Quietly, snow melted from the fields in soft waves. The barn doors stayed open now, swinging gently in the breeze. Each morning before sunrise, Jasper stepped outside first. He no longer limped. His stride still carried a softness in one paw, but there was strength now, confidence. He moved slowly, breathing deep, steam curling from his nose. Remy followed, slower than before, but sure. They moved as one, shadow and echo. A bond no law could undo. The pups had grown taller, louder, braver. Jasper still played, but differently. He didn't bark, didn't chase sticks. He watched. Guided, nudged them from danger. And when one lagged behind, he waited. He wasn't just part of their world now, he was the heart of it. At night, when the wind rustled the trees and the house was still, he returned to the barn. Remy was always there. They'd lie side by side in the straw, breath rising and falling in rhythm. He was never meant to stay, but he chose to, and they chose him. Because family isn't about species, it's about love, about loyalty, about coming back when no one believed you would. Somewhere deep in his bones, Jasper still carried the wild. It would never fully leave. But here, under these stars, on this land, among those who waited, he had found something stronger. A home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Hope and Fur for more true stories of animal resilience, love, and the families they find. Because every creature deserves a place to belong.